Hello, my dears. Have you travelled very far? Are your bags tiring your shoulders? Are you bent under the weight of your struggle and your pilgrimage to my fine abode? Worry not, this is a place where you can lay down your bags and your troubles, and we can talk a little bit. Yes, my name is Madame Sophie Elsa, and today I'm just going to be talking about the trials and tribulations of getting back into reading. If you had told me 10 years ago that this would be a struggle, I shouldn't have believed a word out of your spiny little mouth. No, I would have laughed, I would have revolted. But alas, here we are. I have reached a point in my life where reading was a skill I had to relearn. Okay, so to begin, I shall tell you a bit of a story about how I began to read and how that fell into disarray. I started reading when I was very young. I started reading when I was about 4 years old. Perhaps that's old for some. For the others, it's considered quite young. But I have been told it's young, so that's what I'm going with. My mother was an author, an authoress, and so it was quite natural that in that becoming closer with my mother, I fell absolutely head over heels in love with writing and with reading. So that's what I did. I read everything I could get my hands on. I read sports. My mother would read to me. She read typically The Brothers Lionheart by Astrid Lindgren, who also wrote Pippi Longstocking, which you might know of. And I also had a number of stories that my mother had inherited from her family at the beginning of that they had come into possession of at the beginning of the 20th century, and that had then been passed on to my grandfather and then to my mother. And she read them to me. I remember one book in particular called Nadia to the Rescue, and it had been written in 1912 and then given to my great-grandmother. And it had then passed down, and so it was fascinating because it was written at a time before the Russian Revolution. And so you can imagine that there were tsars and wolves and all sorts of fantastical things. I remember being in the bedroom of my grandfather's house, a manor called Bronte Manor, and we were on this big four-poster bed with carvings in the legs, and my mother read to my younger sister and I, and there were beautiful pictures, and I just fell in love. I can still remember the stress of a young man trying to break out of prison with nothing but a file. I can't remember how the story began or how it ended, as it has been many years since. But that, I believe, is where I got started. So I loved reading. There was a period of my life where I discovered the Hunger Games and fell head over heels. I don't know why. I was very into Katniss and Peter, affectionately referred to as Penis at the time. But for some reason, my attention fell elsewhere. I was about 11, and I found myself in the very first stage of being head over heels in love with the romance of side characters. This would be a trend that would continue through my life. I fell in love with the pairing of Cato and Clove. Odd, I know, considering were savage beasts. But I suppose I've always had a soft spot for rogues and the unsalvageables. Of course, both of them died, and then I no longer actually am such a big fan. Not because I think that The Hunger Games is any less good. I think The Hunger Games is a fantastic piece. And I believe that if I reread it, I'd probably be just as inclined to adore it as I had back then. But I think I've simply grown older, and I can't really remember what happened. The next thing I fell in love with was the book Anne of Green Gables. I fell into this book quite by accident, actually. The first time I read it, I read one page when I was about 10. I didn't get it. Young Generation Z as I am, my attention span was already short, and it just didn't grab me back then. I don't know what it was that made me inclined to pick it up again, and I fell into the world of Anne of Green Gables. You think you know about childhood obsession, special interests, as the autism community likes to call them? I was something else. I would buy Anne dresses online, and I'd wear them around and wear them to death. And I just loved them. I read every book in the series thrice over. Indeed, to this day, I still view myself as having a special connection to Anne in some ways, which I'll maybe make another video about. I also loved the other books by Ellen Montgomery, such as Emily's New Moon, which I need to talk about because, oh boy, they are underrated. And then I went into high school, and those days of non-stop reading started to peter out. It was rather sad, actually. I got into the internet quite young, and I then found myself in the world of social media, and since I was obviously a full-time student, my choice lay between the socialization I could get with people across the globe, or the socialization with imaginary people who couldn't talk back to me. And so, indeed, it is true, I barely read for a few years, especially in that last 2 years. I was in love. Oh, I loved the books I read for class. It was at that time where I first became acquainted with the sensation of actually having to put effort into loving a book, and it really shaped some of my opinions about love, where it's like there are some books that they don't just come to you immediately, you have to work to understand them. And I think that they are no better than books that you can just fall into and it's like, I'll have to talk about the Scorpio race at some point. I think they are no better, but it's it's an experience that I think is beneficial, because it's like you have to spend time with the book, go over it in your mind, and that's what I did with books like Le Stranger by Camus, where I fell in hate with Simone de Beauvoir and Paul Sartre. After that, it was Heart of Darkness and T.S. Eliot. A number of those, of course, he was a poet, he wasn't a writer of fiction, but it was a truly invaluable experience. But for that entire time, I barely read a single word of my own volition. There were times where I tried and I did better than others. I loved The Secret History. I studied classics for 2 years, and I've always been into it, and it was just so interesting. I loved bits, the way that I loved seeing these things that I understood, and I loved learning. I've always had a love affair with history and the classics. I've always watched documentaries. I've always loved art and the Renaissance. Can't sew, but we have a phase where I wanted to. It was just incredible. Apparently that changes when you read it as you get older, but we shall see. It's just, oh my god, the writing of it. I have a few words to say about the main characters, as when it comes to his worth as an actual human being, but the actual writing itself, And then it came to 2020, when the world fell into disrepair because of the coronavirus. I was finally stuck inside with nothing to do, no one to talk to. In my gap year between school and a boarding school, and that's the period where I'm currently in, and I finally started to read, and it was hard. It was actually hard to read. I first read, and I was trying classics because my mother, she is very proud of the fact that she read classics when she was younger. I genuinely don't think that classics are, like, better. When I say classics, by the way, that actually doesn't really mean, like, oh, classics. It's kind of more just older books. But there is a sense of classic, I think, with anything that stands the test of time. But there are so many books that are brilliant that just don't get the same amount of attention. Maybe they weren't advertised right. Maybe they just didn't come at the right time. Maybe they didn't have the right personalities behind them. That sort of thing. So it's no ego boost thing of me trying to pretend that I'm better than anyone. No, it's more that just that love for just being inside another time and knowing it better than you know your own time, and even recognizing your own time in their time. And so now I'm in the process of reading Lady Audley's Secret, and I feel that my arc is finally on the right track again. hope you've enjoyed this lovely conversation. I hope you will stay the night, perhaps, and one of the maids shall get your room ready for you, and I hope all is well. Thank you.